My name's Pugh. I'm a freelance production manager and digital producer. I'm pleased to have been brought in by Unlimited to talk about some of the things I've learned over the last few years about sharing creative work online, and hopefully to give you some prompts and some ideas to help kickstart or progress your digital practice. This is the third of 3 short films exploring the subject of capturing and creating work to share online. The films were broken down into these 3 subjects. The first film started by looking at the what and why, posing some questions you could be asking yourself before you start planning your digital output. The second film went on to think about stagecraft and how we can apply some of that same rigour to our online content as we would with our live work. The third film, this one, goes on to look at some of the technical nuts and bolts, looking at different setups that can help you capture your work depending on what level you're at and what resources you have available. So we're going to break this film down into 3 sections as well. First off, we'll look at the basic tools for live stream or pre-recorded, what you need to know and what you need to get started. We'll then go on to look at the setups, starting with the most basic options and scaling up. And then finally, we're going to look at some of our different hosting platforms and start to think about where you could be sharing your work and what influences the choices you make there. So let's get started. If you've not had a chance yet to watch the first video in this series, go back and take a look at that because it'll help you answer this next question. Are you live streaming or pre-recording? There's a host of factors that will influence this decision, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong about it, but it's really good to be clear before you set out which direction you're going. The tools are basically the same for the first couple of steps, but then diversify a little bit depending on whether you're going out live or whether you're pre-recording to share later. At the most basic level, whether you're live streaming or pre-recording your work, you need something to capture the image and something to capture the sound. Think about your audience and how they'll be engaging with the content. It may be through visuals, or it may be through audio, or in many cases it'll be both. So you need to make sure that you're working in the right way to capture the best quality that you can in both visuals and audio. So again, in basic terms, we need a camera with some sort of microphone. We'll look at their technical options in a moment. Now at this point, in our fundamental requirements, they diverge a little bit depending on whether you're streaming live or recording work. So let's start with streaming. The next thing you'll need as you capture the video and sound is something to encode that material into a format that can be read and understood by a computer and sent up to the internet, which leads on to the next step. You'll need an internet connection. And finally, a platform online to share that material with your audience. It could be Facebook Live or YouTube or a host of other options. If you're thinking about recording your work to edit and share later, a couple of things change. You'll still need something to capture the image and capture the sound. But then rather than an encoder, you'll need something to edit that material together. You want to think about how you might manipulate it or alter it before you share it online. This could simply be adding some titles at the beginning or the end, or could involve cutting between scenes. You might want to add in some extra audio or some visual effects, depending on what the creative project is. There are a range of video editing packages out there, at every level. Common ones that are used by pro video producers are things like Adobe Premiere, Final Cut Pro, and there's also DaVinci Resolve, which I use. All 3 are very powerful packages with a whole host of tools and techniques that you'll probably never need. Premiere is charged by subscription, a monthly payment. Final Cut Pro is a software package that you buy, whereas DaVinci Resolve is made by Blackmagic Design, who make their money basically through selling hardware, cameras and mixing consoles, etc. So they actually make this software available to download for free. When you're just starting out, there's usually a basic video editing package that comes on your laptop or your phone. You can do an awful lot with iMovie, for example, or with the video editing software that comes on Windows. Don't overcomplicate things. If you can shoot a single take and just have basic titles that does everything that you need from your creative project, then just do that. Once your edit is ready, the final step towards sharing it online, again, is an internet connection to upload the content, and then a platform to share it. Okay, moving on. Let's look at some of the kit and the tools that you can utilize to start making this happen. Starting at the very most basic entry-level setup, you can use a smartphone to deal with all the steps in the process, whether you're streaming or recording. This will capture video and sound. It's basically a computer and will allow you to encode material or edit it. It has a data connection, which will allow you to stream and upload the content. So in this one small device, you have a full recording and broadcast setup. So the question then comes about how best to utilize it to ensure that you're capturing your work in the most appropriate way. If you skip back to the second of these films, where we look at stagecraft, you'll get some tips and some tricks about how to apply that same rigor that we do when we're in a live space to producing our online content. There are incremental improvements that you can make to your basic smartphone setup, whether you're streaming or pre-recording material. One simple thing is getting a tripod. It seems like a minor thing, but being able to position your phone in the right place, looking the right way, from the right angle, makes a massive difference to the material that you film. You could look at plugging in an external microphone. Think about what you're filming and decide if a lapel type microphone is appropriate or something that will capture a wider scene. There's a host of options out there. Companies like Rode, Zoom and Shure all produce excellent mics for smartphones. You might want to be able to utilize a mic you already have, or one that's more suited to your work. It might be that you want to be able to stream a soundtrack along with your dialogue, so you'll need a couple of different sources mixed together. Adding an external sound card to your setup will allow you to do that. Companies like Focusrite, amongst others, have a good range of sound cards specifically designed for smartphones. There's some newer entrants into the market, with some new concepts becoming a bit more mainstream now, and extending that creative potential of just working with a simple smartphone that allow for things like interfacing multiple phones together to allow you to have different angles and different takes on the same scene. Take a look at 4x Camera Maker app, or the Go Live Cast from Roland. Both really sort of start to extend the potential of just that simple single device approach. Another similar option comes in the form of the Mevo camera. This is a small, very high resolution camera that comes with an app that lets you cut between parts of that single frame, so you can zoom in all from a single source and create the impression of multiple cameras and even follow the action around the space. Okay, stepping up another level again now, working with dedicated cameras. The main reason that you might want to do this is you'll see a marked improvement in the image quality, especially if you're working in theatre or in darker settings. It also gives you a bit more creative control over how your content's captured. You can achieve that nice film-like shallow depth of field, or you can reach deeper into the performance with longer and interchangeable lenses. Many mirrorless or DSLR photographic cameras will shoot video that can be edited, and many now will also be able to output via USB or HDMI to connect to a computer. It may be that the camera that you already have can start to help you capture and share your digital content. As before, it's worth thinking about the same things to do with sound, about external mics or the external sound card, looking at ways that you can add extra layers and bring out the detail in the audio as well as the video. Think back to the smartphone approach where we started. The camera in that case is basically attached to the computer. It's in the same box. It's already connected up. If you're using an external camera, like a DSLR or a mirrorless camera like we've talked about, you need to think about, particularly if streaming, a device which will take the signal from the camera and allow it to be fed directly into the computer. So in a lot of cases, it'll be converting HDMI to USB. Something like an Ultra Studio Mini from Blackmagic Design is a good option, or the Camlink from Elgato will do the job too. Of course, if you're simply editing the material rather than streaming live, you would just download the film files in the same way as you would photos, in the same way as you would normally use your camera. So with something like an SD card reader or something like that. If you don't have a camera yet, but you're looking for one for live streaming or filming work, your budget will be the main thing that dictates what options are open to you. But there's some great products coming onto the market now. Sony's just released a brand new camera, which is really a consumer level cost, which is designed for filmmakers and vloggers. People like Blackmagic Design have a great 4K pocket cinema camera, which is perfect for streaming and for capturing work. In this case, I'm just shooting this on an old Fujifilm stills camera, but it's really doing the job. So, think about what you've got available and what you've got at your disposal before you start spending money. So the next step, once you've started using an external camera, your next step is to think about filming from multiple angles. In theatre, being able to cut between bits of action on stage, to pull back for a wide shot and then come in up close for a bit of dialogue really helps to create engaging content for an audience watching on a small screen. The same applies for music and live art. The days of having a single camera locked off at the back of the auditorium are long behind us now. We need to be thinking about how we make our content captivating for an audience watching at home on a small screen, and multiple camera angles can really help do this. In technical terms, we'll need to bring a vision mixer into our setup to help bring all those different sources together into a single film. Now, Blackmagic Design again produced the A10 Mini vision mixer, which is a very cost-effective and very powerful production tool. It'll allow you to add graphics, multiple sources, add sound sources too, and then encode it all into a single feed to go direct to your computer. Outside the technology component of doing a multi-camera shoot, it'll give you a range of other things that you need to think about. You need to think about camera operators and where to position them. You need to think about cabling and safety measures that you'll put in place to protect your artists as well as your team and your audience. You need to decide if the live event audience might be impacted by the streaming activities. Are you prioritising the live audience, accepting that some of the camera angles, for example, might be a little bit compromised, perhaps just outside the sight lines, or the other way round? Are you prioritising the digital content and the live audience are there accepting that cameras might be moving around or blocking their view? There's no right or wrong answers to this. It really depends on your project, your creative product, and every case will be different. In a multi-camera shoot, it's really important to understand the pace and rhythm of the piece, especially for the person doing the vision mixing. So building in time to your schedule for the team to see the work, perhaps discuss the piece with the creative team, is really important. Once you've got your external source, whether that's a single camera or a full team with a vision mixer, you'll then be sending that signal to your computer using one of the interfaces that we looked at. You then need to be able to encode that, the images and the sound, into a format that can be sent up to the internet. There are several bits of software that help do this. OBS is a free and open source option, and then Wirecast is very similar but is a paid for tool, so has a few more options and capabilities available there. In the simplest terms, these pieces of software are the interface between your content and the internet. The software allows you to determine where it's going to be shared and then converts the film and sound into data that can be streamed from your computer over your network connection to the internet, where it's made available for people to watch. It's just worth mentioning at this point about internet connections. If you're streaming work live, you'll need a robust internet connection. You'll need an upload speed, i.e. the speed that the data is sent from your computer to the internet, of at least 5 megabits per second. You can check your internet speed using a tool like speedtest.net. If the connection's slow at your end, where you're broadcasting your work, your audience will experience buffering, much as you'd see if you had a poor internet connection on the train while you're trying to watch BBC iPlayer on your phone. The final bit of this equation then is the online platform. This is the space where you're going to share your work with your audience. There's a range of options. Many of them are well known and tried and tested, and many of them let you post up your work for free. Facebook or Facebook Live, YouTube and Instagram all let you post up your work for free, but it's likely to be interrupted by adverts, whereas channels like Vimeo or Crowdcast will charge a subscription, but you're much more directly in control of how people engage with your work. A lot of the most common platforms will let you share your work, whether it's live streamed or pre-recorded and then uploaded material. The technology between the main platforms is basically the same. Everything we've talked about so far will let you connect to any of these locations. So the main consideration for you should be, where are my audience going to be? Where are the audience most likely to find the content, and which platforms are most likely to engage them in the way that you would like? You need to think as well about what happens next to the work. Do you want people to continue to be able to see it, or do you want it to come down after it's been broadcast that first time? Once you've thought through some of these questions, go back to Facebook, go back to YouTube, to Vimeo, look at how they best fit the requirements of the project. At the moment, with venues shut and in lockdown, lots of people are looking at options for charging for their content online. For pre-recorded material, Vimeo is a good option for pay-per-view, but does carry a monthly subscription charge for you as the artist too. Crowdcast is a relatively simple way of charging for live streams, which actually very few other platforms offer. But again, there's a subscription charge to use the service. The Hay Festival this year presented all their digital events through Crowdcast. It's worth trying to be creative about how you're monetizing your content. Can you take donations? Can you think about how a viewer might be converted into a supporter for your organization? Think about, for example, whether having more connections on Facebook might help share your work more widely, and think about what the intangible value is of that versus charging a few pounds for someone to watch your film. The final thoughts in this series of films is really to encourage you to start thinking about growing your digital practice organically. Start small and try out some ideas. Use the simple tools and techniques that we've talked about. Think about some of the tips we looked at in film 2 for filming from home. Steadily build up your audience. Just because there's 40 billion people on the internet, it doesn't mean that they're all there and available and ready to tune into your work. Start small. Think about reaching out to people and targeting people very specifically with content that speaks to them. Think about what you can take on yourself or with your immediate team rather than necessarily paying out to external contractors to do work for you. If you are getting bigger and moving into more complex projects, you could look at renting equipment rather than buying it. When you get to that stage, you should reach out to companies and organisations that are live streaming already. Look at the setups they're using. Think about how they're approaching the projects. It might be that you're able to share some ideas and potentially share resources as well. There's a wealth of opportunities and possibilities out there when it comes to sharing your work online, whether that's through live streaming or creating digital assets. If you start the process by thinking about your audience and what you want to say to them, then imagine how that can be done most effectively using some of the tools and techniques we've looked at. That will help you create meaningful work that will really touch people.